Now, I've planted food plots just about every way imaginable, going back to 1995. And throughout the first half of that planting experience, I mean, literally we're approaching 30 years, which is crazy to think about. I had to really be cost conscious. And I would say up until 5, 6, 7 years ago, and even now, I still try to spend wisely when it comes to food plots. I don't want to waste money. I don't want to waste money when it comes to seed combos, the type of plantings I have. I want to be very methodical and calculating if this will work. I've had very, very few food plot failures, very few. I would say less than 2-3%, only because I'm very calculating. I want this to work. I try to do things well, and I don't like wasting money. And so, boy, back in the day, I can think of my first food plots, I wasted money on a tiller, renting a tiller, going out and renting this Troy-built tiller or whatever it was, and just jarring my shoulders and arms to death, trying to break up this terrible soil and get through the sod base. And it wasn't a real effective use of money. In fact, that first one failed miserably. The second one that I did succeeded. And that was in the same years, back in 95 and 96. But it really taught me that, for one, I wasted money there. The other one, I just threw seed out with a handheld broadcaster Clover and used a little weed control, and it worked. It was pretty cool how that all worked. But I've had a tractor, I've used a grain drill, I've used a tiller, used a disc. And so I've gone throughout all this ATV sprayers, UTV sprayers, handheld sprayers. I've used a rake before, I've used drags behind the ATV. I've used my ATV ramp pulled sideways. I've used timbers as a drag, logs, you name it. I've probably done it when it comes to food plotting. I've hired someone to come in and disc or till different times when we couldn't practice weed control, so we've tried that method too. Bottom line is, you go back to some of these roots of how you can create food plots pretty cost effectively, and at the same time, number one here, you don't have to sacrifice success or pretty looking plots. If you plant your plots correctly, they might take a little bit more labor. You'll find that in the end, you save not only money, but some time too. And so you can do this pretty cost effectively, and at the same time, really be effective and efficient with your time as well. Now, we used to travel 7 hours from the UP of Michigan down to Southwest Wisconsin to plant our plots starting in the early 2000s. And when we did so, we really couldn't afford to stay in hotels multiple nights. And often we weren't staying in a motel at all. We were just leaving at 6 in the morning, coming down, getting our chores done in 2-3 hours, 4 hours at the most, and then driving home in the same day. So we had 14 hours of driving, a few hours worth of work. We'd leave early, get home late. But that's what we could afford to do. We couldn't afford to go out to dinner, have fun, and stay in a hotel for 1-2 nights and do a lot more work. We really had to be calculating. So it wasn't even just the cost. It was the cost, that was a huge factor, but it was our time. We have this amount of time to get this done, and so we had to be very efficient in all different ways. But one thing's for sure, we did not sacrifice success when it came to getting our food plots in and how pretty they looked. We had lots of volume, we had high attraction. Some of the first food plots in the area, I know one of my friends, his dad, their cabin's just a couple ridges over, but they could look over to where we were planting our food plots in the property we had initially, and they could see this long row of green and things sticking out the top. I'm sure they thought we were growing pot or something out there, but it didn't look normal. It wasn't normal ag. It was our tall, probably 35-inch, 30-inch brassicas that we planted. And so they came over to investigate. My friend's father came over and came back home with a giant turnip that he ate and said, they're growing turnips. So they hadn't seen these food plots like that in the past. And of course, now that's changed a lot since 2002. But we had pretty plots then without a lot of equipment, and you can too. Number 2, right here, one of the most important things that I could recommend is a hand spreader. I recommend an Earthway Model 2750. I'm not sponsored by them. I get no product endorsement money from recommending them. It's just my favorite hand spreader, and I like it because it's got a vinyl bag. If I'm seeding by myself, which a lot of times I am, I can simply put a large bag of 100 pounds or 50 pounds right on my knee, and I can hold the bag with my left hand and balance and pour the bag into the seed, into that Earthway spreader, pretty easily. I can do it off the back of a pickup sometimes too, where you have a 100-pound bag of whatever. And I say 100-pound, 50-pound because those are the more difficult ones. Obviously, if you have 10 pounds of seed for a brassica blend, 6 pounds per acre, that's pretty easy to just put in the bag. You don't have to worry about spilling. But when you have a 100-pound bag, I can put that on tailgate. You can open it. You can allow the seed to come out the corner, and you can just trickle it in and make sure you're not wasting seed. And it's an easy way to put seed in the bag. But the first one I had back in the day was a cloth bag. And that would just lay over flat. It had a green bottom to it, kind of a manila-looking bag spreader, cotton, whatever it was, and it would just fold right down. It was very difficult. I can remember back in the day, Jake was born in 2002, and he would have been only 4 or 5, and I can remember him trying to get him at the age of maybe even 3, 4 to just stand there and hold the bag while I spread things in. So he's helped me for a long time, going back many, many years. But I like that earthway spreader. And when you're spending $45 for something that you're using out in the field and you're using for work, it's probably not going to last that long when it's mechanical. So you're not buying this, and I don't want you to get mad at me when this wears out in a couple of years after you put 5,000 pounds of seed and lime and fertilizer through it. I have put 7,000 pounds through one in one season and had it last. But what I find is it's not necessarily that it won't last while you're putting a lot of seed through it. It won't last when it sits there and it's got some corrosive pieces of fertilizer or lime on the inside that chew up the gears and destroy it, make it start skipping. And let's face it, a lot of these are plastic parts. I've used other brands, and I'm not going to mention those brands, that just don't hold up. I don't like the harness chest type because, for one, I can't put as much seed in, but two, I can't just throw them around the ATV and the side-by-side and put them on real quick and go. I want to just be able to put my seed bag upside down so it's not coming out the zipper, upside down next to me, take it out and start seeding. I don't want to take time to put a bucket on, bucket off. We were just talking about how many acres I seed. I said 1,800. That might be in total, I don't know, but I usually go about 18 acres a year, 15 acres a year that I seed by hand. But seeding that many acres by hand, it's a lot of food plot space in multiple states. I find for me the easiest, quickest, most efficient way is just simply use a bag, put it out. I can stuff as much as I want to in there. Let's face it, most of the time I'm putting seed and fertilizer in there, the bag is open on top because I don't have any room to shut it. I've filled it all the way to the brim. And I found that to be the easiest, especially with ATV racks and just throwing things around on the side-by-side and going on to the next plot, which there's a lot of plots to plant. So this is a very important one right here. And that can be your catalyst for getting seed to the ground extremely easy. Number 3, a backpack sprayer. What's interesting about this is that's what I started with. You know, my first food plots in the UP of Michigan, for example, back in 99, that was 98, 99, right around there, but it was spraying 3 times in an area of tag alder. After I chainsawed the tag alder down, sprayed it 3 times, killed the tag alder, killed the weeds in that area, and then I spread an annual crop of oats, brassica. It was this just special mixture that you buy, you know, from the store, and you find, you know, of course, oats choke out everything. But what it didn't choke out is the full blend of clover that I'd added in there. So even if you use the wrong blends of annual, where you might put a cereal grain and a brassica together, that clover will still get established down below it and grow in the shade, and then the next year exploded. I maintained that clover, that little 1/4 acre patch there that I'd carved out and started by just spraying, killing the weeds, throwing it on the ground with a handheld spreader for 10 years. I mowed it every 3 or 4 years. I mowed it every year, once or twice. And then I used glyphosate every 3 or 4 years when there got to be an appreciable amount of weeds. And you'll find that won't kill the clover. You use about 1 quart per acre instead of 2. And you do that before it's raining, before there's a good growth period, and you'll just set it back a little bit, but you really destroy the weeds that are inside, especially the grasses and some of the broadleaves. So I had great success with that, and that backpack sprayer is important. What I found with the backpack sprayer, though, is that normally we're spreading on an ATV sprayer 25 gallons of water to cover 2 acres, 12.5 gallons of water to cover 2 acres. A lot of people say, how many ounces per gallon? Just forget about all that kind of stuff, because you need to determine how many gallons it takes for your sprayer combination and UTV, ATV, or backpack sprayer to cover an acre. And what you'll find with the backpack sprayer, because it's the least efficient, it only has 1 nozzle. The more nozzles you have, the wider your spray, the more efficient you can be. When it goes down to one nozzle and it's a backpack sprayer, you find you're very inefficient. So I find that you need double the water. You're going to go through 20 gallons. So if it's a 4-gallon backpack sprayer, you're probably going to go through 5 of those fill-ups per acre, maybe even 6, before you actually effectively cover that acre, where in an ATV sprayer, it's going to be about half that. So think about that as you're putting water through there. Of course, never use pond water, creek water, dirty water, swamp water, because if there's soil particles in that water, it'll dilute and kill the glyphosate. Now, you can use pond water if it's clear and there's no soil particles getting in, but a lot of times that's hard to determine. So it's not that you can't use pond water, it's you can't use pond water with soil particles, and most pond water has soil particles, especially when you're disturbing it to suck up the water and to get water in the sprayer. Same with creeks and any other natural water source. So be very wary of that so you're not wasting your time. Number 4, rake. That's optional. Now, if you start spraying a little bit too late in the spring and you have a lot more thatch, you might find that even though it's dead and there's debris, you need to rake a little bit to get the seed down to the soil. Once the seed is on the soil through the thatch, you're going to get good growth as long as the thatch is dead. You can't have that compete. And Dylan reminded me of that, and we're talking about through all of this, is that when you are spraying, you're doing that because if you're working on these food plots, you have to take every precaution to take care of the weeds. If you're not taking care of the weeds, your little quarter-acre slice of heaven and food plot's going to turn into junk, and it's not going to be attractive. And what's really misleading is there's a lot of information out there that weedy food plots are good. Well, during the summer they are, but your summer food plots aren't doing any good, and a lot of times you shouldn't even have summer food plots. But when those weeds start dying, turning brown, deer don't like them. So when it gets into October, November, when you expect to go sit there and watch a food plot and hunt a food plot on the way to another destination food source or a holding plot, then if it's full of weeds in the summer, you're going to have nothing to watch because there won't be an appreciable amount of food in that location or a level of attraction. So you have to eliminate weeds. It's critical. The rake, you can use that to get seed down in the soil, but again, that thatch has to be dead. Now, number 5, 3 sprayings. It's something I started back a long time ago, 20 years ago plus, where you spray the area 3 times. Your most important spraying is that late April, early May, when you have that first green up. Those weeds are 8 to 10 inches high. It's you're in an aggressive growth phase. It's not when there's snow flurries 2 weeks later. It's when it's 50 degrees, 60 degrees, sunny out. Weeds are really starting to show. They're 8 to 10 inches high. Then you spray, you get a very effective kill. Not only do you get an effective kill at that time, you're also eliminating future weed debris. So you don't want to wait till the weeds are 2 feet tall, because now those weeds are going to lay there. They're not going to decompose as much throughout the entire summer, and you have a harder time getting seeds onto the soil. So you want to spray that first time when the weeds are 8, 10, 12 inches high, sometimes 15 inches high, depending on the location. After that, you're waiting 4 to 6 weeks. We would usually go mid-June, and then after that, we would go end of July and spray a 3rd time. It's a lot of spraying, but we didn't have a tractor, we didn't have a disc, we didn't have a tiller, we didn't have money to pay somebody to do this. And so we found that it was a very efficient way to have great looking food plots with a lot of volume going into the fall by practicing those 3 sprayings. And you can spray glyphosate. All we use is glyphosate, but you can spray glyphosate right on top of your seeds. So what we would do is in that 3rd spraying, the end of July, early August, we would spread our brassica blend on half our plots, and then we would spray all our plots for the final and 3rd time and right over the seed, and we'd have a great brassica crop. We'd come back a month later and we'd put something else down, our cereal grains, which are oats, wheat, rye. We'd combine those, sometimes peas with those at the same time. The bottom line is we separated those 2 out, and we were able to plant right in that 3rd time. So really, for planting our food plots, when we used to drive 7 hours, we would drive 7 hours. That was a big expense, sometimes staying in a motel, but we tried not to. We would spray 3 times. And what I found was it's about, in today's cost, it's about $25 times 3 per acre, so about $75 a year, because the cost of Roundup went up from this year from $41. The last jugs I bought this year, I bought a lot of them for the entire year, but they were about $120, $125 for 2.5 gallons. So I'm going at today's prices, not back in the day, because back in the day, this would have been about $25 per acre for the entire year's worth of chemicals. Now it's about $75, but boy, it pales in comparison to the cost of a tractor, drill, disc. And we're not working up the soil, so we're not drying out the soil. We're not exposing weed seeds. We're not creating the risk of erosion in hill country. So there's something to be said for, we try to now use the buckwheat in the summertime. We limit the number of sprayings, cut it from 3 to 2 or 1. And then that way, we still have that effective weed control. Buckwheat's a smother crop. It's the best smother crop. And then we're eliminating the amount of chemicals we're putting in the ground, but we're not ripping up the soil. We're not destroying that top layer of microorganisms. We're not drying out the soil. We're not creating the risk of erosion. So there's a lot of great things that we do with that buckwheat blend. The problem with the buckwheat is sometimes people want to till it, disc it up, and it can be very difficult to do so. That's why we just crush it with ATV tires, a lawn roller. Look up Ultimate No-Till food plot planting. You can see that. We talk about that extensively in many videos. But 3 sprayings, it's a way to get great food plots. And then it comes down to seed type. You know, seed type, we're planting a lot of annuals. Why? Because annuals die. Oats die, for example. Brassica die. Peas die. If you plant late planted beans into your standing buckwheat, that dies. Now we sometimes have the rye that we have to worry about in the spring, or wheat, and I say worry about because if you let it grow, it gets 6 feet tall. With a limited amount of equipment, no tractors, no discs, no plows, no tillers, you can have a very, very hard time working that and incorporate it into the ground. And a lot of people say, well, let's just work that into the ground with a tractor. For one, that's very expensive, but you need to do that in Labor Day in most locations, mid-September in most locations, and get that rye to grow again with the seed head. Many people do that far too early, especially to plant brassicas or something else. But the worst thing you do is crush rye right down over brassica. Brassica planting is August 1st. It'll get choked out by the rye. I saw people even doing that in deer management organization circles last year, and you had this rye coming up with the brassica, and you just look at it, knowing by experience for the last 2 decades that brassica was going to get choked out. And you can see they didn't plant any follow-up pictures of that because it gets choked out, gets killed, and it's not very effective. Again, a reason you don't combine brassica and cereal grains together. So we're putting mostly annuals in because we can just throw that down. Now clover occasionally, if you're not worried about creating a summer deer herd and a doe factory, and it's something you can't really maintain that much, clover is an option. In a lot of areas, especially the upper Midwest, down to Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas even, and over to the East Coast, clover can be a really viable option for you, especially small plot circumstances. You're just not going to get up to the property very much, but you still have to mow it. You still have to take care of it. Like I said, we hit ours with glyphosate every 3 years, somewhere around there. We were able to maintain it for 10 years, but we mowed it every year, sometimes 2 to 3 times a year because they weren't hitting it during the summer that much. That was in the UP of Michigan where they had lots of food. They didn't hit the clover that much in the summer because they had an overabundance of natural forage and habitat during the summer. That wasn't the limiting factor for deer and food during the summer. It was during the winter and fall, and that's why the clovers, we actually planted clover in the UP of Michigan on our trails in areas where we wanted to walk through to get to stands during October, November, because we could count on deer not being there because the clover was eaten down to the dirt. So we use clover for different reasons. Clover might work in your area. I know Kentucky, Southern Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, I'm sure there's areas in southern Wisconsin, over into Iowa and Missouri. Clover might be a really good option for you, but you still have to mow it. And that comes down to mowing it. What are you going to mow it with? I burned up belts on a long tractor trying to mow it back in the day, 20 years ago. I wouldn't try that. You need something pretty beefy to mow it. And what I found, without a tractor, without a brush hog, then I was mowing it with a weed whip down here, which that could be your most expensive aspect of all of this. Is if you have clover, people say, well, I have clover, I'm going to save some money. But what are you going to mow it with? Because that costs some money. Maybe it's something you already have. But a weed whip, I found by experience, a lot of experience, it was about 2 hours per acre to mow. You just walk and clip it on along the top, not that bad. You can mow about 3 feet wide as you walk. You're just mowing down the top of the clover and get it to regenerate and thicken the stand and eliminate weed competition at the same time. So it's a great practice. It's something that can be done. But you can see it's not starred down here. I've starred the seeds. Obviously you have to have seeds. The sprayings, the backpack sprayer, and the hand spreader. Just those items right there you can use to create exceptional food plots. Just depends on how much time you want. I don't personally want to plant 8 acres this way. I'd rather use a cheap ATV sprayer, Packer Max, where I can crush and cultipack. I can put buckwheat blends in during the summertime and crush it with the cultipacker. But bottom line is, I don't need to have those things. It's just more time. It's more leg time, more walking time. It turns your planting day, let's say you had a big day to plant 4 acres on a Saturday. Instead of coming in and planting those in 5, 6, 7 hours, Maybe with the heavy equipment, it's 1 or 2 hours or 3 hours. Of course, if you have friends, it makes it a lot easier. You can use the side-by-sides, ATVs for other chores around the property, but you don't have to have those to have great plots. These are the things that I've looked at that are the basics for having good plots. The start items especially. You don't have to have a weed whip because you don't have to have clover. But 75, 100, 45 right there. So you're looking at $295 per acre for something fairly cheap. And an acre of food goes a long way on small parcels, especially. You know, if you own 80 acres, then you have some means to own those 80 acres, pay taxes on. And even then, if you have 3 acres, you're still talking about $900 with very limited equipment to get the job done. Not to mention, you probably already have an ATV, maybe even an ATV sprayer. That would be that next upgrade. I ended up shopping around several years ago for a decent Yamaha Grizzly. It was a 2007. I paid about $3,400 for it, got a good deal. And it's been a real workhorse for me for mostly spraying throughout the years. So again, you can have cheap plots. These are the basics of what I would recommend for cost cutter food plots going into this spring and summer. You can get a lot done. And the cool thing is, really important, and it's priceless, because you're going to not only save money, but you're going to save time, and you're also going to have great looking food plots that will compare to anybody else's that's doing this or planting the same seeds, and you never have to work the ground, till, plow, disc. That's a great thing. It's actually good for your food plot space. It's actually better for erosion, drying out the soil. There's a lot of reasons not to till the soil. And that's where you're seeing most of the farmers. You know, a lot of farmers are going no-till practices too. It's very efficient, and they still have good soil, or they wouldn't do it because they staked a reputation and living on planting those farm fields. So you can get it done cheap, you can find success, and have a great spring, summer, fall, great plans, great food plot plans, and you don't have to sacrifice a lot of attraction and the ability to actually create and build the foundation for an incredible deer hunt, both evening stand locations around food, and then filling up those bedding areas for morning hunting because of that food source that you're planting this year. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.